Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Mixed Martial Pod, episode 7, I believe. I'm actually starting to lose count now, that's weird, it's not even been that many. Today, we have some awesome shit to talk about. I'm stoked. We've had some awesome news come up, as well as some kind of sad news in the past week regarding things like UFC 294, Conor McGregor and USADA, as well as some more of the future of the featherweight division and so forth. So, let's get into it. First of all, I want to talk about UFC 294, but I'm going to start with the main event. Charles Oliveira is out, Volkanovski is in. Boy, this guy has the dog in him. Man took this fight on 11 days notice. He just had elbow surgery after the Yair fight. Was still in recovery about a month and a bit ago. Has only started sparring maybe 4 to 6 weeks ago. And he's had a kid very recently, in the past month as well. And he said, yeah, I'll get on a plane to Abu Dhabi in the next 4 days. This dude has no fucking chill. He literally is willing to do anything for that rematch. And I'm very, very happy for it. Because I think that rematch should have been immediate. As much as I love Charles and I want Charles to get the opportunity, as soon as that fight ended at UFC 284, they should have immediately booked a rematch. Because it was way too close to even think that we could just move past it. Yair obviously was an issue that we needed to get through. We needed to get Volk to pass Yair to get rid of the fact that we had an interim champ. But Volk beat Yair in July and we still didn't have a fight booked for Islam. So we seriously could have booked him for this fight in the first place. But obviously the plans for having Oliveira in there were probably in play a bit longer than the fact of when we heard about it. So obviously I'm not super disappointed that we got that, especially because I really wanted to see Charles reclaim his title, but inevitably Charles received a nasty ass cut to the top of his eye in the 5th round of his final sparring session the day before he gets on the plane to go to Abu Dhabi. What a shame, honestly, but it is almost like it was meant to be for Volkanovski. The stars could not have aligned more. There is a couple of things that this has an effect on, and that this could change. First of all, obviously, if this is the case, Islam is not going to say anything about it, okay? And in fact, he will say the opposite. He will sell the opinion that that is not true. But it's very possible that because Islam was preparing for Charles, now that he's had a switch to Volkanovski, he's not unprepared for it, but it's a bit of a kick in the balls, right? Like, it's kind of like he's put in all this work over the last couple months preparing for this fight, and it's kind of been shoved to the side. He's definitely going to benefit from the preparation that he made, but the specific training he would have been doing for Charles is not going to be completely useless against Volkanovski, but it's not the way that he would train for Volkanovski. And with less than 2 weeks notice, he's been told that he needs to switch up his training regime. He's trained for this guy before, which helps, but regardless, it sucks. And I wonder if it has a little bit of an impact on the psyche of Islam. He's going to be ready. He's a fighter. He's going to force himself to be ready. He's got Khabib in his camp with him. He's not going to let it get to his head. But I feel like there is an inevitable 1% that has probably had a bit of an effect on Islam, with the fact that he's like, damn, really? Like, seriously? You're doing this to me? Whereas Volkanovski, while he has all the cards stacked against him with not having a training camp, having to fly to Abu Dhabi, having to come into his meat grinder of fight preparation on days notice, hours notice, having to fly all of his training partners out to him, and then having to fly them all out to Abu Dhabi with him as well as the injury he's coming off of. I think he is probably pretty fucking ecstatic at the opportunity. So when this phone call was made to get Volkanovski in this fight, I am willing to bet Islam's reaction is a bit of a, damn, okay, I'll do it, fine, sure. But that initial just, at the very beginning of finding out, I think will have a small effect on Islam thinking that he could have been more prepared for the fight. Whereas Volkanovski knows he could have been more prepared for the fight, yet he's just excited to get the opportunity. He's got nothing but joy for this opportunity to have posted itself up to him, right? He would have liked longer to prepare for it, but I think that this change will have a small effect on making Islam a little bit more upset about it, and making Volkanovski quite happy about it. So that could have a slight effect on the fight. Maybe that small difference can make up for some of the fight camp that Volkanovski doesn't have, and for what Islam has achieved in his first 6 to 8 weeks of camp leading up to the Charles fight. What happens afterwards? Because now we've fucked this whole thing up. I already knew that this shit was like very, very confusing, up in the air with the lightweight division. It's one of the divisions, like all of them, that has a lot of contenders, and we're kind of arguing about who should go next, and we've promised it to a lot of different people at once. Gaethje says that his next fight's for the title. Oliveira was just booked to fight for the title. Volkanovski is now fighting for the title. So if Volkanovski, even if he loses this fight, say, and then we just go back to square one of Makhachev going through the division, he now has to go through Oliveira again next, because you can't give it to anyone else other than Oliveira. Oliveira was booked. He was set to go to Abu Dhabi. This wasn't him pulling out of the fight. He's not medically cleared to fight. He's not allowed to fight. So how are you going to not give him the next shot? Unless something changes, like Volkanovski winning. Obviously, you can argue for things then. But in the instance that Islam wins, you got to give it to Charles next. And then we're assuming that Gaethje is after that. And to be fair, Gaethje probably can be after that, because Gaethje could fight Islam post beating Oliveira, or Oliveira post beating Islam. Both kind of make sense. This kind of fills in some gaps, as much as it creates fuckery. If Volkanovski is to lose, it's going to tarnish his ability to get up to the lightweight division again. He might not get another shot at double champ, at least not while Islam is champion, and is, even if Islam was to lose, he'll still be in the conversation. Islam's still going to be the guy that's like going back and forth with these top 5 dudes. And when that's the case, it's going to be really hard to get Volkanovski up there before you get Islam up there. What happens if Volk wins? What the fuck do we do then? Then we have a double champ, and Oliveira's due a fight, Gaethje's due a fight, Islam is probably due a trilogy, because then technically it's 1-1. So I think it's both best and worst case scenario if Volkanovski wins, because then we are due a trilogy. Whether we get it or not is a different story. I don't know how the UFC would want to run that. I don't know how Makhachev's team would want to run that. Volkanovski obviously wants to be really fucking active, so I don't know whether Makhachev would even want to fight again immediately, whether he'd want to take a year or 6 months or whatever, whether there'd be an interim lightweight belt popping up while Volkanovski was to go back and fight Ilya. A lot of things could happen. But if Volkanovski wins, this shit's spiraling out of control, and we're living in Volkanovski's world if that happens. We are all living under the control of Volkanovski if he wins. He's running the shit then. He's pound for pound number 1. You got to put him above John Jones then, because he's a double champ at that point. What do you do? Speaking of Ilya Topuria, supposedly we knew that Ilya was meant to fight Volk next for the featherweight belt. And there's been rumors that it was supposed to be UFC 297, January 20th in Toronto. That is actually supposed to still happen. From the sources that I've found and what I've been able to read, that's still due to happen. If Volkanovski is fit to fight after the Makhachev fight, as long as there's no injuries or no other reasons that he can't make January. But if he can't make January, they're not actually postponing the fight. They're doing an interim belt with Holloway and Topuria for the interim championship. Now, this is crazy. First of all, I don't hate it, but I don't love it. He's the only guy that we haven't fed to max. Every single contender has been fed to max. And well, I feel bad saying it, because max, if you can beat every contender, you are the number 1 contender. You are due to fight the champion if you're beating everyone else in the division. But we've purposely gone out of our way. Volk has even said, don't give him to Max. Volk said word for word, do not give Ilya to Max. Let me fight him. And it might still happen. We might still inevitably give Topuria to Max. And in the process of that, we might have promised Max a title fight. Because if Max is to win against Topuria over an interim championship fight in January, this means that Volkanovski in Holloway 4 is happening. Now, I'm not opposed to it. I'm not for it. I think that there's definitely an issue with that area in the featherweight division with it's like the curse, right? Max has it. Rob Whittaker was dealing with it before the Dricus fight. It happens to a lot of guys. If Holloway was to win that belt and we get a 4th Volk Holloway fight, that's all good and well. If it's a competitive fight, that's awesome. It shows that maybe Holloway has made leaps and bounds to reach Volkanovski's level, as we saw he wasn't at in the 3rd fight. But what happens if Max beats Volkanovski to become the featherweight champ again? Are you going to tell me that we have to do one of these two things? Either we have to have the first ever quintrilogy in UFC history by having a 5th fight, and not only the first ever quintrilogy, but the first ever quintrilogy of title fights. We have to do that to decide it, because they're 2-2 at that point. 3-1 technically, sorry. It's 3-1 is the score, but a lot of people would argue it's 2-2 because of the second fight being pretty much scored to Max. I'm not taking a side on that. I'm just saying those are the two sides of the spectrum, that it could be either one of those things. I guess we have to do a 5th fight. And then if Holloway was to beat Volk in a 5th fight, I'd actually be pretty happy to see Holloway stay, because he's earned the spot then. But the other side of what we could do, rather than a 5th fight, is let Max defend his belt. And that is fucked up. If they go for a 4th fight, unless Max injures Volkanovski and sets him out for 6 months to a year or something like that, if he beats Volk in that 4th fight, how on earth are you not giving Volk an immediate rematch for that? How on earth? He's the only reigning champion in the UFC currently. Not a single champion has more than 2 defenses. 1? I think 2 is the most. I can't remember which champion it is. Aljo was the highest before he lost his belt, and he had 3. So it's definitely only 2. You're gonna let Max defend the belt after the 6th-time defending champion loses it. No immediate rematch. And after the score is set to 3-1 according to the UFC, that would be a horrendous disrespect to Volkanovski's career. There is so many things wrong with the way that could play out if that's how it goes. I would think that the way this could work very well is if Volkanovski beats Makhachev, fights, and then can't fight Ilya. Max and Ilya fight. Max wins. Then Volk and Max fight. Say Max wins, right? We're probably due a 5th fight then. But what if Volkanovski chooses to move up and just stay at lightweight? Then we have a different story. That's more fair if Volkanovski's choosing to not fuck with Max any longer, to just let him have his division that Volkanovski had reined in longer than Max did. Just be like, okay, I'm done with the featherweight division now. Honestly, you've shown that you're beating all the guys that I'm wanting to fight. Keep it. Have it. I don't want it anymore. No disrespect in saying that, but I just have the division. That's fine, because I'm going to lightweight and I'm staying there. That would be okay, but I don't think that's going to happen. I just don't see Volkanovski wanting to. He said when he beat Max the 3rd time and he called out the winner of whoever is Oliveira and Makhachev, he said that he wanted to keep both divisions busy. That was the reason he wanted to be double champ, because he was bored of the featherweight division. Because he beat Max 3 times, he beat Ortega, he beat TKZ, and now he's beat Yair. So if he beats Ilya, there is no one. There is absolutely no one left. At that point, we're taking overlapping fights, you know? We're putting our Josh Emmett's in there, or our Calvin Kattar's, which is weird, because they've lost to not only one person that Volkanovski's beat, but several. Calvin Kattar has lost to Holloway and Yair, correct? And Emmett has lost to Ilya and Yair. So that's 2 people have beat the guy that you want to put in the title fight then. That doesn't make any sense. So if he beats Ilya, I don't see how he can even stay there. So maybe, even if Ilya and Max don't fight, Volkanovski can beat Ilya and go up. Maybe he would still just want to stay at 155, because at that point he's achieved double champ status. If he can hold both belts at the same time, that's awesome. But maybe even if he can't, maybe he is still going to be sick of the featherweight division. He could not be. He might want to do a John Jones where you end up fighting the same guys multiple times over. You have a couple of duo fights, because we have to feed you the same guys again. Just the guys that did the best. Say Ilya puts up a good fight and then loses, but maybe in a year or two's time after Volk had fought one other guy in the featherweight division and he'd been up at lightweight for a while, maybe he could then also fight Ilya for a second fight, that's not out of the question. But I think it would certainly be making that division so much harder to follow, manage, and watch. I feel like it's an issue that definitely occurs when you have a dominant champion, like, say, Izzy. Granted, a lot of people said that Izzy's fights were boring, so it's a bit of a different story. But people were bored of the fact that he was so dominant. There was no competition. He was beating the guys really decisively every time. Whether that's because his fight style or not, he was doing that, and it was making people not want to watch. And it was making people talk about the fact that they were saying, an example I could think of is the Cannonier fight. People said it was really, really boring, just because nothing happened. Izzy didn't even break a sweat, really. So that could happen with Volk. We'll have to wait and see. Either way, Volkanovski versus Makhachev 2 is fucking awesome. I love it. I'm obsessed with it. I really want Volk to win this because I still think he won the first fight, and I'm seeing a lot more people come out now saying, oh, so this fight's coming up next month or next week. So I've rewatched the first fight, and so many people are saying, I think Volkanovski won. And I'm sitting here listening to this going crazy because I said this the moment the fight ended. So many highly respected people in the UFC as well as just the combat sports world said the same thing. Joe Rogan said the same thing. Watching the fight live with Brian Callen, Brendan Schaub, and someone else, I can't remember who it was. They all said that Volk won. It's crazy that it's taken this long for people to go back and rewatch the fight and say, I think it was 3-2. Because it was 3-2. It was close, dude. It was so close. I will never be of the opinion that it wasn't a close fight. But under the scoring apparatus that we are bound to, that we're stuck with, that we don't get a choice on how we score the fights, Volk won. 3 rounds to 2. They were all 10-9s. There was no 10-8 round in there. That's just the way that it was. So this second fight, I hope that we can have one of two things happen. Either A, Volkanovski wins, and it's rightful, because he won the first one. And then essentially, right, if Volkanovski wins, it's almost like this never happened, right? Basically, with Volkanovski taking double champ status next week, it would be as if he beat Makhachev back in February, and this is just his first title defense in the lightweight division, and his first defense is against Makhachev because of how close the fight was, which is what should have happened. Volkanovski should have won the fight, and then they should have either done one of two things: given him another match against Makhachev because of how close it was as his first title defense, or given him the Oliveira fight. So those things should have happened, and we're getting one of them. So if Volkanovski wins, this pretty much lays it all out flat. The only issue is we might get a trilogy. So depending on how close the fight is, a trilogy may be warranted. But if Makhachev wins, I hope he does it decisively. Because if we get a close fight again, and it goes to a decision, and he wins a decision, maybe, even if he wins like 4-1, it's still sad that that Volkanovski could obviously hold his own. He could ensure that Makhachev couldn't finish him throughout the fight, because the first fight was Volk's. So if he was to lose this fight closely, that's when a trilogy should have actually been warranted. because then it would be 1-1. So I'll be very upset if Makhachev wins this by a decision. If he wins it decisively, joy to the fucking world. I'll be happy. As much as I love Volkanovski and I want to see him succeed so bad, and we haven't had a double champion in a long time, especially not a dominant one. If Makhachev finishes him, that's decisive, man. That's a definitive answer. And I'll be more content with Islam holding that belt, because he would have earned it then. He would have certainly earned it. We'll find out this weekend. All will be revealed. And God, will it be glorious. I hope to God it's not a short fight. And if it is, I hope it's for good reason. I hope it's because one guy is leaps and bounds above the other. Because we deserve to have definitive answers about this matchup. Because if we don't get a trilogy after not having definitive answers in this fight, that's a missed opportunity. Especially with what Volkanovski had to do for Holloway after having 2 close fights. If we don't have to do that for Volkanovski after 2 close fights with Makhachev, I'll be severely disappointed. Next, for UFC 294, boy, this card got fucked around quickly, and it's now been saved. It's been last minute saved, and I'm so fucking glad. Paulo Costa was saying so for ages, he was claiming online, did interviews with Ariel Helwani, among others, said, I'm not pulling out of this fight. I've had surgery weeks ago. I'm still training though. I'm not pulling out of this fight. He had staph infection. Nasty one. But he said he's not pulling out of the fight. I was so hopeful for it. I thought he wasn't going to pull out of the fight. I really did. And then he pulled out, not to his own choice. He was forced to. Which could be good, because I'd hate to see, I saw somebody mention it, it's a good point. I'd hate to see a Dillashaw-Aljo fight, where they get in there and we just see that it's clearly like he wasn't prepared. He's clearly hurt. He couldn't even put up a fight. Dillashaw had one arm. And it's his elbow as well. So if it was bad enough, Paulo Costa would be fighting with one arm, and that would be really disappointing against Hamzat, which is the fight that we've been wanting for a long time. But fuck me, did they replace it with fireworks? We've asked for this fight almost just as long as we asked for the Paulo Costa fight. Obviously, there's been a long line of shit talk and whatnot between Paulo and Hamzat, but Chimaev versus Usman was something that was rumored months and months and months ago, and we wanted it. They were talking about it online. They were just having issues with the weight, and that was exclusively because Usman didn't want to interfere with Izzy. Usman wanted another title shot. He wanted to fight a contender that would be his opportunity to have a definitive performance where he could say, hey, look, I'm still here. I'm still that guy. Leon just got the better of me. Give me another shot. Whether it's against Leon or Colby, whoever wins, or whatever it was. He wanted to give an answer to the people that were questioning whether he was still that guy. So he didn't want to do it at middleweight because he didn't want to become a middleweight title contender because of Izzy. And the fact that those guys have always had a bond, especially with the whole African champions thing that they had with Ngannou at one point in time, where they wanted to all be this kind of show of black excellency, of kind of proving that, I don't know what they wanted to prove with it. There's been plenty of black champions before, but there's nothing wrong with the way that they marketed that. But he didn't want to fight Izzy for that reason, and that's fine. Honestly, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with champions not wanting to fight each other. There's an issue with title contenders not wanting to fight champions, but there's no issue with champions not wanting to fight other champions in different divisions. That's fine. But Izzy's not the champion anymore. And I don't think, well, I know, but I'll get to that. I don't think Izzy is going to be fighting for the belt just yet. I think Izzy will actually be having a contender fight. With the answers that we have now, I think Izzy and Dricus will be fighting. I think Izzy and Dricus are going to be fighting either a Fight Night main event or a co-main very soon. Because Dricus isn't getting the next title shot. So unless he wants to sit and wait, he's not getting it. Because Usman versus Chimaev is a number 1 contender fight. Boom! Boom! Holy shit, that's fucking awesome. The amount of story that goes on there. Khamzat has trained with Strickland before. Says that he actually quite likes Strickland, which I'm happy to see that those guys get along because they're both fucking awesome characters. But he said, the game is the game. I will fight you if I need to because I want that belt. And that's awesome. I love that. I love to see that. I love to hear that. Usman has beaten Strickland before in welterweight when Strickland was a welterweight. So he also has a claim to the title. However, Khamzat was promised a title shot, which is the difference. I've said this multiple times before. Dana said, Khamzat, get 1 win at middleweight, you get a middleweight title shot, because he was pretty much due a title shot at welterweight, but he simply couldn't make the weight anymore. So that was the promise. Go up a weight class so that we don't have to worry about you cutting anymore. Win 1 more fight, and we'll give you a title shot. Here's that fight. It was against Paulo Costa. Costa wasn't guaranteed the fight because of Izzy as well, because he's lost to Izzy. Then Strickland won. Paulo probably would have been guaranteed a shot as well if he had won, because Strickland is a new champion. And Izzy is not in the conversation anymore, because Dana's confirmed that this is a number 1 contender fight. He hadn't done so when Paulo was in the fight, but now that Usman's in the fight and they've got the match set, they don't have any questions about who's going to make it and who's not, whether the fight will even go down. They've confirmed it. They've said, this is a number 1 contender fight. The winner of this will be Strickland's next fight. There's so much story there. Either way, I'm happy. I'm happy either way. I'd love to see Khamzat get the shot that he's been going for a long time, and Strickland's an awesome guy for him to do it against. And I'd love to see Usman back in the conversation. Honestly, I'd really, really enjoy seeing Kamaru back fighting for the title. It just comes down to whether he's still that guy. Khamzat will be a good test for him, especially with his wrestling. They might nullify each other with the wrestling, and it might turn into a striking match, which will also be cool to test each other's striking, because we know both guys can strike. We've seen it. But Usman at 185 could be a different beast. Same with Khamzat. But we haven't seen Khamzat strike with a striker who's like knockout artist. You know what I mean? We've seen him go with Gilbert Burns, and Gilbert put him to the test. But Khamzat claims that I don't remember where I read this, but supposedly the reason that Khamzat was striking with Gilbert was because of Gilbert's submission game from the bottom, which makes sense because he's a multiple-time Jiu-Jitsu world champion and a black belt. So it makes sense that his submission game from the bottom would have scared Khamzat a bit, because Khamzat's not a BJJ practitioner, he's a wrestler in Sambo, which isn't necessarily focusing on submissions from bottom as much as it might be chokes and things like that. So I am super excited to see these guys go at it. They're going to go, like I said, they could nullify each other's wrestling and go in a striking match, or they may wrestle. And if they do, this will, 1, test Khamzat's skills in wrestling, because we know that Usman's a good wrestler, and 2, it'll test Usman's knees. We'll see how deteriorated Usman's legs are and whether he actually can work through the pain that he's experiencing to fight on the ground. So that's going to be awesome. I can't wait. And I think there's something to be said about Dricus's failure here. This fight was not made because Dricus was never getting the title shot. This fight was made because Dricus never asked for the title shot. There is video out there of Dricus du Plessis saying, "I'm next." That's true. That's very true. There's interviews of him saying that I should be next before these guys. That's true. But that's not enough. It's not enough. Dricus, as much as I hated him and now I've grown to love him after the Rob fight, and I think that I honestly want to see him get the title shot that he deserves, he's done nothing for it, man. He's done nothing for it. His promotion is horrible. And this business will not, regardless of the fact that the best fight the best in the UFC, this business will not give you the shot on a silver platter. It won't. Ask Bilal. Ask Dariush. You gotta fucking work for it. You can't say, I'm on a win streak, I've earned it, you know? Like, it won't convince the promotion. It won't convince the sponsors. it won't convince the fans, and it won't convince the matchmakers. Because until you get that hype, that media hype, to show that you want the fight, the fans want the fight, and even if fans don't want the fight, you've shown that you are a polarizing figure to the point where the fans will watch the fight, whether they want it or not. Dricus du Plessis has not done that. He did that against Israel Adesanya. He showed that he was definitely the next guy for Izzy. If Izzy beat Strickland, there was no question. Dricus was getting that fight. But as soon as Izzy lost, Dricus missed all the signs. He didn't read the writing on the wall to see, you're no longer promised this shot, man. The storyline had everything set out for you. That you hit the fucking jackpot with that Izzy beef. Absolutely everything, especially beating Rob. That was like, that's relevant to Izzy, that beating Rob, okay? That makes sense because of Izzy's performances against Rob. But now that Strickland is the champion, not only is your beef no longer irrelevant, but the Rob fight, while still it is proven that he's beaten the number one contender in Rob, the guy that was at number one, the boogeyman beating everyone else in the division. Rob didn't fight Strickland. He didn't. So you needed to immediately, you should have been in Sydney. You should have been in Sydney, but you didn't fucking go. And that is why you are not getting a title shot, because you have not proven that you want it. You think you deserve it, and while you do, you have not earned it. Because the circumstances changed, and while this is competition, it's also business, and it's also entertainment. And with business and entertainment requires promotion. And you do not know how to promote, Dricus du Plessis. Do not get me wrong. No disrespect to you, man. I want you to get this fight. I want to see you fight. I'm of the people that disliked you heavily and gave you a clown the shit out of you coming up to the Rob fight, saying like, how the fuck has this guy even gotten this shot? Like, I switched sides. I like you now, man. I like you more than Izzy now, especially after seeing the whole like the race baiting that Izzy did, whatnot, whatever it is. I don't hate Izzy, but he does a lot of really questionable things, especially in the act of attempting promotion. Honestly, I'd be rooting for Dricus in a fight against Adesanya. I'm not sure. Like I know I've just said that that's probably going to happen. I'm not sure that's what I want. I'd like it. I certainly would like to see that beef squash. It's good. The fight will sell well. It's a great storyline that we'd like to see the end of, but it probably is fair if Dricus would like to wait. He should. I think he should, because I believe that he should get the next title shot. It's just, he needs to speak about it. He needs to come out and say it. He needs to say, hey, whoever beats Strickland, or if Strickland beats this guy, I'm next. Say it and it will come true. I've said that many, many times about these fighters calling fights. The fights are never made until they're made. And you and your voice box is the only thing that can shift that timeline and stop a fight from being made and make a fight be made. That's the only way you can do it. So someone please teach Dricus how to use Instagram and Twitter like every other fighter it does. Even the ones that don't speak English tend to be better at selling themselves than Dricus is. You deserve the fight, man. I want to see you get it, but you're not earning it right now. You're not selling it. And until you do that, you're going to really struggle to get yourself in there. Especially when you've got guys like Chimaev and Usman. They will sell it. Strickland will sell it. Even Izzy, if he's going to chase the fight, Izzy will sell it. But you're not selling it. In a division full of media darlings like Hamza and Izzy, people that are very popular, you need to speak. You need to call these guys out. You need to prove, not even prove, but make your claim to that title. Not just on some interview with, I don't even know if he's been on Ariel's show, but like an interview with Deshmo or Helen Yee or whatever. Like, that's not going to work. You got to do all those things together. And when you do it decisively. Call Strickland, say that he looked shit. If you don't have to believe it, but say it. You got to sell that fight, man. Otherwise, no one else is going to want it. I want it. If you had any half of a brain cell, you would understand that Chael Sonnen wants it. He's like the one guy on the internet that's saying that you deserve that fight, and you called him dumb. You don't get it, man. We are trying to tell you that you need to sell it. You deserve the fight. I say that. Chael said that already. He's not calling you stupid for thinking that you have earned the fight. He's calling you stupid for not saying that you've earned the fight. For not coming out and being like, hey, I deserve this. This is my fight. I'm next in line for this guy. On multiple occasions, you've got to keep doing it. Get on Twitter. Say it with your own words. Make some fucking insulting memes about Strickland or something. Whatever you have to do, do it. And I'm sure that the media will carry that on and carry that storyline forward, and people will see it and they'll want the fight. But until you do that, I can't help you. Lastly, I will top this off with just something quick about, like I mentioned earlier, USADA and Conor McGregor. The UFC is ditching USADA in 2024. Now, before everyone says what they've already been saying for months, and even the fighters on the UFC roster have been questioning this and calling Hunter and Jeff Nowitzki about this stuff, they're not going test-free. They're not just letting people free up steroids next year. That's not happening. They're switching to a different anti-doping agency because USADA, according to what they've said, has proven to fucking suck. Like, they've given USADA years to get better, and they've claimed USADA has been good for a long time, and they got them to where they are. Without USADA, they wouldn't have been able to catch a lot of the steroid issues that they were dealing with earlier, back in like the TRT days and whatnot. So, they're grateful. They're very grateful. They have nothing but good things to say about what USADA achieved for the UFC, but they have not caught up with the times. Apparently, it's like they've been promising an app where they can track the fighters. And then when the fighters move cities, the app goes, hey, you've moved city. Press this button to say that you are confirming that your location isn't wrong. That you aren't still in Arkansas. You're now in Los Angeles, you know? That's not a hard thing to do. But apparently they've been working on that app for years. Or over at least 6+ months is how long that they've been expecting the app to be done. And they don't even have like an example of it. It's literally just USADA saying, we've almost got it done. They don't even have a demo version or anything like that. They say that it's done. So that, among other things, supposedly the UFC is just sick of dealing with from USADA. They have terrible flexibility. They're not willing to change things as new science is learnt. Like with things like stem cell research coming out, the USADA is stiff on it. And while they have other agencies that they have to speak to, like WADA, which is, I'm not sure what it stands for, but for those of you who don't know, that's just the worldwide anti-doping agency. That could be what it stands for, honestly. They have to talk to other people, so USADA's kind of, you know, coy about how they want to push the boundaries as to whether they want to introduce new things, new types of drugs, new types of hormone therapy, all that kind of stuff. They're not willing to budge even a little bit. And the UFC is kind of sick of that. They said that it's been a long time of constantly dealing with issues from USADA, whether it's the lack of test requirement communications, testing times, knowing the location of the fighter, the supplements that are of concern in the fighters' diets and whatnot, and not being able to understand what is actually okay to consider when you have a red herring pop up within people's, you know, supplements and diets and things like that. So the UFC says that it's been a long time coming. It's been at least 6 months that they've been looking into doing this, into changing anti-doping agencies. And 6 months ago, we weren't dealing with Conor McGregor getting into the USADA pool. We were waiting for it. We were definitely waiting for it, but we weren't having issues talking about we're going to get exemptions because it's already been 6 months. We were under the impression Conor would undergo the 6-month rule because December was more than 6 months away, which is when Conor was claiming he was going to fight. The UFC never once said that they were going to break the 6-month rule. And if they did, I apologize, and I'd love to see when they did. But they claim that they never did, and I do not recall ever hearing them say that. When they mentioned it, I was like, that's a good fucking point. It was only ever Conor saying, I'll fight in December. And it was only ever Conor. Sorry. The UFC said that he would fight in December, but they dropped it the moment the 6-month rule had come. And as soon as it hit June and it was 6 months away, they dropped it. Conor was the only one saying, I will get the exemption. The UFC never said he will get an exemption. They were probably open to the idea of it. They might have toyed with it, but they never said, yeah, we'd like to try and do that with Conor. Never, not once. And USADA didn't say that either. So USADA coming out and saying that Conor McGregor is the straw that broke the camel's back, and we are no longer able to keep a tenable relationship with the UFC, has supposedly is them trying to cover their ass, because USADA splitting with the UFC was not USADA's choice. The UFC told them at the end of this year, we're not paying you anymore. The UFC makes up 30% of USADA's budget. I believe it's over $10 million a year. USADA does other testing for other agencies, but the UFC is the largest chunk of their budget, and that's the largest chunk of their work, and they're losing it because they couldn't keep up. All those millions of dollars, apparently there was between $1 and $2 million per year put into technology. So that's like things like creating an app and bettering location tracking for fighters. And there's nothing for it. So I was shocked to hear this. If you want to know more about it, please go and listen to it's long as fuck. It's an hour and a half. But Jeff Nowitzki and Hunter Campbell sat down, laid everything out, all the information that they had. They gave their opinions on everything. They cleared up any misinformation that USADA had brought out, as well as they did an hour of questions. An hour of questions to the media, to people like MacLife and other guys that go into the press conferences and ask questions. An hour. And there was not a single time where I was like, yeah, that sounds kind of unfair. I think they're trying to cover their ass. They sounded like they were wanting to move forward. They were sick of not being able to talk about things like stem cells. They were sick of not being able to let the fighters be content with knowing that they're not going to be pulled out of weight cuts when they are dehydrated for the last 36 hours, asked to draw blood immediately. Because USADA won't even be able to give them an hour to just chill and then stop cutting weight so that they can regain some liquid in their body so blood can be taken from them. So I kind of don't blame them. I'd love to hear if there is two sides to the story and USADA has a lot of issues that UFC is refusing to acknowledge and that's not being talked about, but it doesn't seem like that's the case. It really seems like they're covering their ass and blaming this on the McGregor situation and saying that made the relationship untenable, when in fact, not only was the UFC never a proponent of saying that Conor McGregor will break the 6-month USADA testing pool rule. They in fact sat down with Conor and the head of USADA recently and said, hey man, you've got to do the 6-month rule. And Conor went, alright, I tried. Sure, I'll do it. And that's why he's in the pool now, because he tried and he couldn't do it. So they've got him in the pool. And people are saying that Conor getting in the pool is suspicious now. You guys are just picking anything. You said that it was suspicious that he wouldn't get in the pool. Now you're saying that it's suspicious that he's in the pool because USADA's going. USADA is going for just another anti-doping agency. So if USADA knows that they've been fired and they've got 3 months left on their contract, they have Conor McGregor in their pool for the next 3 months. If they wanted to fuck the UFC up, they could. But they're going to probably test McGregor a shit ton over the next 3 months that they have him. And I'm willing to bet that he's going to come back clean. Whether he went through cycles or not during his therapy of his injury rehabilitation and whatnot is a different story. And it's also to be questioned as to whether that's even really a morally wrong thing. Hormone therapy is great for injury rehabilitation. In fact, some injuries that people would never recover from, like a broken tibia, can be recovered with the right level of hormone therapy. So I can't believe that the amount of people that think that this is suspicious. It's not suspicious because they've been wanting to fire USADA for the last half of the year, and McGregor has been giving the UFC a bit of trouble getting into the USADA pool pretty much that whole time. So the UFC hasn't been trying to get USADA to let Conor in and sign the papers. Come on, we just want to let him fight. That's not what's happening. Conor wanted to do that. The UFC was always kind of like, yeah, sure, buddy, whatever. Like, you can keep trying that, but it's not going to work. And then it got to a point where eventually they said, hey, man, we sat them down. They were sat down. with USADA, Hunter Campbell, and Conor McGregor, and they all said, hey man, you got to do the 6 month pool rule. It's the rules, you got to do it. And he said, okay, I'll do it. And this was before the relationship had fallen out with USADA. UFC was already planning to drop them, but they were yet to tell USADA that, and USADA had no reason to think that they were being dropped. They had no info. And when USADA came out and said this, right, about the Conor McGregor issue, and they said they don't know where the UFC is going to go from here on, and they think that it's like, I think they said something along the lines of like, good luck to whoever you try next. It's like they didn't even know. The UFC didn't actually tell USADA who they were going, like what their plan was to go with next. USADA had zero info on whether they were choosing another anti-doping agency, whether Conor McGregor was the issue, whether they were doing it soon, whether they were going to go with a period of no anti-doping agency, whether there was going to be an overlap of anti-doping agencies throughout the rest of this year, whether they were going to hire a new agency early and have both of them testing just for the last few months of the year until USADA was gone. That's not the case, but USADA had no idea how that was going to happen and who was going to replace them. So the fact that they've come out and said what they've said shows that they're just trying to cover their ass. And like I've said, I'd love to know. I'd love to see other people's info on it. I'd love to be proven a little bit wrong, or to be corrected in a sense, because I want to have this stuff right. I want to be on the right side of this, and I want you to be as well. So I hope that this clears some stuff up, and I would like you guys to do your own research, because I was very happy to do my own and find out what I found out. It was pretty eye-opening. So McGregor's back in. He should be back soon. He could be back for UFC 300, but I doubt it, because he needs to headline. He won't take a co-main event spot, and title fights don't go below non-title fights. So I'd say UFC 300 is going to be dope, but I think we're going to get McGregor after that. Maybe 301, 302, 299 even, possibly, whatever it is. He probably will undergo his 6 months tenure. I don't see why they would break it. They have no reason to. If they're not going to put him on UFC 300, they have no reason to want to do it any sooner. So it is what it is. We'll see him soon. I'm excited. He's now being tested. He's in the pool. Not only did he submit his papers, he's in the pool, and he will probably just translate straight over into the new doping agency's pool when that comes around. So get ready, guys. Conor's coming back. I'm excited. Chandler's in camp now. He's in preparation. He's now actively preparing for the fight, as opposed to just being ready for it. So is McGregor. He made a claim that he's up training at Elevation now. So it's all coming together, guys. We're going to get that fight soon. And USADA's gone, but drugs aren't in. We're not getting steroids, okay? That's not happening. What we're getting is probably better. We're going to have more leniency on the ability for these guys to undergo stem cells and things like that. It's possible in the future that we'll be able to make deals with hormone therapy to be able to get guys that have really, really bad injuries back into the game. That doesn't mean that they're going to be allowed to take hormone therapy while they fight. It's just about the rehabilitation and injury recovery. Like, this stuff is really important, and it's life-changing and career-changing. So we should be really, really ready to accept a change like that, because it's going to change the sport forever in people's abilities to return from career-ending fights. Like I said, go do your research. If anybody wants to give me any info that I missed that was a glaring hole in my story, I'm open for it. Let me know in the comments. Thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you did enjoy this episode of the Mick Marshall Podcast. I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.